say October, November, whether Trinidad was having Trinidad and Tobago was having a spike. It boiled down to semantics, and after that, just been tit for tat.
And you're right on semantics.
Yeah, it's just been pure semantics as far as I can tell.
More semantics. At one point, a narrative started to be spun where is domestic situations. Well, it's really, yes, we have a problem with domestic situations, but the problem is gang warfare. Let's not kid ourselves. And the inability of the authorities to deal effectively with gang warfare. And the entrance of the illegal guns in the country. So you could put up how much distractions you want. You could add how much of the narrative you want about the legal guns. But it still comes down to your ability or inability to deal with the gangs in the streets and the hardened criminals. That's what it comes down to. And it's primarily illegal guns they're using. So let's not get sidetracked by 4 murders by, not that they're not important because they're people, they're human beings, by the legally obtained firearms when over 99% of the murders being committed are by illegal firearms. Why are we allowing ourselves to be sidetracked by that?
And I think it's also part of it also has to do, as I've said before, with the ammunition. Ammunition is an unseen component in this thing, and firearms and the use of firearms, ammunition is a consumable. So without ammunition, firearm is just a metal piece of stick.
Yeah, and the fact that there's been no real monitoring and oversight where the importation of ammunition is concerned by legal importers.
A couple of years ago, I did a project with the OCNFB data issue they had, and one of the things that the discussions, this was like at least 7 years ago, and back then one of the conversations we were having was whether or not they should start to monitor the price of ammunition and the price of these things, and to see how that varies over time, because then that can give you an indication as to whether or not the measures that you have in place are working to restrict the flow. So if there's a restriction in supply, then there'll be less ammunition available, and then as a result, the price will go up. So what struck me the most in that information that came out in Parliament with what the minister said in the Senate was that the price of ammunition had gone down, right? And this is an indication clearly that there's an abundance of supply, that they have gotten, an increase in supply from somewhere, as opposed to what obtained previously. So that is, for me, what is most troubling, because you see, on the crime scenes, you see on various crime scenes, I think it was mentioned somewhere that, 65 rounds, 65 shells were seen.
Yeah. But the fact that the minister could say yesterday millions and millions and millions of rounds, those were the words he used. Millions and millions of rounds. Let's not kid ourselves, not thousands of rounds. Millions and millions of rounds of ammunition have been imported in the last couple of years. Of course, he was taking some stripes at Gary Griffith. He didn't call his name, but that is where a lot of his narrative was pointed. The government has had the issues with Gary Griffith, and Gary Griffith has had the issues with the government. So it's every opportunity to slam each other, clearly. But at the end of the day, I don't think Gary Griffith didn't break the law by granting the FULs that I know about. You understand? If he has this, the authority hasn't said so. The legal importers, from the information from the minister and others, they didn't break the law. It's just unregulated and unchecked. It's unmonitored, it's unregulated to a certain extent.
So you may not have broken the law. I agree with the importation. But I think I know a lot of people don't like Stephen Williams, right? I had always had a good impression of him with the things that he was doing at the time with evidence-based policing and so forth. But
bless you.
Yes, I know. But he understood, though, I think, and commissioners before him, and certainly police officers coming up in the ranks who are now themselves on the executive and so forth, and maybe even at the senior soup level, but they all understand that, if you just have more guns on the streets, whether it comes from illegal, legal, that really is the problem. And I think they really took, they adopted this, as Minister Hines said, this unofficial policy of
restrictive policy.
It's a restrictive policy. And that was in their mind one of the ways to sort of stymie and to hold the thing back, to hold back the flood. And I understand Gary Griffith's perspective in that he has a different point of view, not having had the benefit, I believe, of coming up through the ranks and seeing these things firsthand. I mean, for all his experiences and all the things that he said, he still doesn't have that in the, you've been there for 30 years.
Well, his mindset also, his training is that of a military person.
Indeed.
So he has a different life philosophy completely. I get the impression, I could be corrected if I'm wrong, that he has no problem with every eligible citizen having a firearm. That's the impression I get, which I am philosophically opposed to, because at the end of the day, it's almost like an unspoken right to bear arms direction you're heading, as exists in the US. And I don't think the US has had major problems with that from state to state, and that's a big country. You could imagine this condensed space with that. Indeed.
So the problem with firearms and crime in general is multifaceted. It's multidimensional. And I sometimes see, we just go down one dimension at a time, and that's definitely not helpful. You talk only about legal firearms. That's not helpful. You talk only about, it's and the way we talk about gun violence and the way we talk about gang violence in this country is, it's gang violence. And the impression being that, or the hidden message being that, you are not being affected. You will not be affected by gang violence. It's only certain areas and certain people. So you have nothing to worry about, and I think the solution to this is going to be, from my perspective, we need to understand the problem more, because there are a lot of things that we take for granted, certain assumptions that are made, and I could give a few examples, but that are not correct when it comes to the causes and when it comes to the implications of actions in the past. That is like, okay, we've had this measure before, we've had this intervention. Was it successful? Because that's what we're not doing. We just sort of keep throwing the kitchen sink at it, everything. And, when this becomes political, it's just politically, but when this obviously doesn't work, and we need a sort of something to placate the public, come up with another idea and we just throw it again. There's no sort of a sense as to look back and see whether or not what we did, why it didn't work, and what can we learn from it.
I just think they're scrambling. I think the situation is so overwhelming that they're scrambling. I mean, it's really overwhelming.
They really don't know what to do.
So criminality is so multifaceted. The advent or the evolution of the transnational drug traffickers are so sophisticated that they've infiltrated clearly the TTPS at some level, in some people's estimations, high-ranking level, clearly elements of customs and excise, which is how they operate in other jurisdictions. In other jurisdictions, they also infiltrate the judiciary because they are very sophisticated players. They either induce you by money or induce you by threats to yourself and your family because they're that powerful. I just have to call one name and we'll get the point. Dina Sita Hall.
Oh.
And you realize how sophisticated and how pointed and how powerful they can be. Does that actually put a chill through your body of how that execution was, that assassination was executed? Follow her for months, identify her roots and her habits. And this is somebody who's worked in the American prosecution system, the UK prosecution system, was one of the most brilliant legal minds in this country. And they followed her, tracked her movement, followed her one night, aborted the mission. And I don't know if I'm saying things that people don't know out there. Followed her another night because there was an attempt before that they aborted, according to the intelligence. Followed her for another night. Put concrete weights in a panel van. Put that across, followed her with all that, pull across her so that she couldn't even ram, pull up behind her and aside her, and opened fire with a semi-automatic weapon, so much so that she didn't have a chance in the world. God spare. It was a global level execution in Trinidad and Tobago. Ask yourself why somebody like Dina Sita became a target. They imported, I use the word guardedly, assassination expertise. Imported, somebody came into the country to spearhead and execute that with local operatives and then went back out of the country. Tell yourself, if our police service and our protective services are capable of dealing with that sort of onslaught, given the billions of dollars that may be at stake here. So I guess it's easier to focus on the red herrings. 108 legally obtained firearms involved in murders, including 4 murders and other criminal activity, when we well know that the real issue is illegal firearms. So let's talk about that for a week and forget the real issue. Come on. I mean, I've seen this play over and over.
You know, as you mentioned, the placing of mass or weight into the pickup truck or whatever they used so that she couldn't ram it. You know, that same tactic was used, I believe, in the heist where I think it was on the Churchill Roosevelt
on the highway, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where that security company was transporting cash to Tobago, and you know, somebody did the same thing. You know, they rammed them from behind, had know, they yeah. So these are what you'd call the MOs
of sophisticated criminal organization.
Yep.
Transnational organized crime. That's what they call it, transnational organized crime. It's organized and very sophisticated. And they only invest that kind of money because of the billions of dollars involved.
So I saw something this week, right? Was it last week? But, you know, when I think Darius Figueroa would have said yesterday that, you know, Europe is becoming the hub for, well, not a hub, but a major destination for cocaine. And I think The Economist, was it? They did like this short video clip that they put out every day, more or less, but they focused on the port of Antwerp in Belgium, and it has become the major or the largest transshipment point for cocaine into Europe, largely fueled by, you know, gangs from the Balkan regions and so forth. But one of the things that I saw was interesting was that they had this bust with 11 tons of cocaine just sort of in a container. They have the same issues that we have in trying. They can't scan. Well, they have a lot higher volume, but they can't scan every single container. And the people that they eventually caught for this particular bust would have been the head of their the police unit, specialized police unit, vetted, that deals with drugs. So they caught. He was charged. Another police officer was charged. 2 other police officers were charged, and a single port worker. And what the head of the port there was saying was that it is so difficult to deal with, you know, just giving a bribe to a port worker simply for them not to put a container, not to put it in this location, but to put it in this location. And that was the sort of challenge that they were facing. And he was saying that, you know, the idea was that when you bring into, you know, the EU countries like you know, Balkan regions and so forth, and that they will become more like the EU, but it seems like they are turning the EU into you know, places like them essentially. I thought it was it
is frightening, to say the least, that we've allowed ourselves to get to this stage. And the thing about it is that I find it quite amusing that one administration points fingers at the other, because it's existed for the last 4 decades. In the last 2 intensely. So while one party points fingers at another, they've all been subject to the vagaries of these. We can open the phone lines, 222-TALK, 222-8655.
Oh, jeez, and
8655 and 866-525-1099.
222-825.
You might as well do something, and do nothing else.
I was reading on all the messages you sent me. 612-8255.
You can't read and talk at the same time?
No, I can't. I'm a man. Yeah. Men cannot multitask. You don't know that by now. And toll free North America, it's 866-525-1099. All right. That's our numbers directly into our studio. Of course, don't forget our message board. You can send us a message via our mobile app or our website at power102fm.com.
Minister Hines also said yesterday that the issue of Port of Spain, the airport, and Point Lisas weren't the main areas of focus now, that they were looking at the secondary bonded areas, which is where they're finding that the illegal guns are coming through. Okay, you have this information. What are you doing about it?
The after effect. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There are two schools I thought to consider when you're talking about these two issues. One, the commissioner, the Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, or any minister could ask the favor of the Commissioner of Police to grant FULs. They could do that. That is the relationship they have. So first of all, I don't understand why why Fitzgerald Hines all of a sudden have amnesia. If you ask Gary Griffith to give, especially people of his security...
Precisely. I don't recall as a legal maneuver, I always say.
Yes, it's a cop-out. But for something that you could do, there's no reason to hide the fact that you did something like that.
No, but you have to remember that it's against the context of Dr. Munilal brought it out. I guess, and I could be wrong, to show in his mind that there's some level of hypocrisy in saying that Gary Griffith granted too many FULs when you yourself had allegedly asked for FULs to be granted to people. That's the whole game.
Ah, I see.
You understand? So you telling me I get granting too much FULs, but you asking me for FULs yourself to be granted.
Okay,
for your people. You understand?
So
that's what I think the intention was, Dr. Munel's questioning.
The other avenue of that is the detail of which this came out, this information has revealed itself. I am seeing text communication between Fitzgerald Hines and Gary Griffith. Fitzgerald Hines not going to release that. So it means Gary Griffith is playing a nasty game of being a petulant little child, as I always call him, to be dropping private information that happened with you in the capacity of a commissioner of police out on social media.
And all politicians don't do that? And so what's different about Gary Griffith as a politician that you wouldn't expect this? Because I've seen it from all the major political players have done this. All.
Yes, what's different? Gary
How
Griffith,
different? How?
In the capacity of a commissioner of police, is not a politician.
Well, when you hire a former politician as commissioner of police, what do you expect?
I guess the problem is Patrick Manning. The problem is
you didn't hire a former politician as a commissioner of police. So that is go away. That skill set is go away sometimes. Give me a break now. Were you delusional? Yes.
Absolutely right.
Brother, please.
Everybody felt that Rowley was making a big mistake by pulling somebody from the belly of the UNC to make him commissioner of police. So you're right. This problem catapulted from Rowley appointing Gary Griffith as commissioner of police. And
why not? And let me tell you something.
He made in his life is appointing Gary Griffith commissioner of police.
Well, that's what he's saying now, because the marriage fell apart. But why not, if at the time Gary Griffith, we like to talk about Gary Griffith as though he was all bad. Gary Griffith wasn't all bad, eh? Do you understand? Gary Griffith made some significant gains and in my opinion, improved the public confidence in the police service. I don't know that all the approaches I agree with, but we can't pretend that Gary Griffith is all bad, and we can't pretend that Dr. Rowley and the government appointed him in a vacuum. They thought he had the requisite skill set given the available people before them, and they appointed him. And he did quite well in some people's estimations. It's just that the politician / commissioner combination may not be ideal for our circumstance.
And I recall that when he was appointed, Dr. Rowley using that appointment as an example of his political maturity, and that he was willing to reach beyond
the aisle,
and find the best person.
And there was nothing wrong with that.
All right, Chairman, let's grab this call here. Thanks for holding. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
I want to express some disappointment with the journalistic community in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll tell you why. Yesterday I listened to the doctor you had as a guest, someone who I've been listening to for a while, and someone who has encouraged me from listening to him to do research on the drug trafficking situation, the transnational criminal organizations. And a lot of what you're saying is confirmed if you do your research. And why my disappointment is this. The matter of murders and criminal activity in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's human trafficking or what have you, they have been discussed mainly in a local context as if our crime fighting mechanism is a complete failure. Now, I'm not giving them any kudos, but I'm just saying that all matters, whether it's economic, whether it's climate change, they should be considered in an international context. And the information about transnational drug trafficking and the relationship to murders is clearly outlined in the data. For the last at least 5 years, Trinidad and Tobago has been in the top 20 in terms of murders. And if you look at the list, they clearly identify countries along the drug trafficking routes, whether it's in East Africa, whether it's in Southern Europe or what have you. And all these areas, just as the doctor, as your guest was saying yesterday, all these areas are tied into a whole network of murders and criminal activity. Unfortunately, we are in the path of the drug trafficking. So I think we need to see it in that sense, because if we only analyze it locally, we will never be able to see the real solutions. I will end by saying this. With all the work by the DEA and all the international crime fighting organizations, drug trafficking now is at its highest point in the last 2 decades. So clearly, there's a failure in the international criminal crime fighting mechanism to fight back against this beast, which is the transnational criminal organizations that he was talking about. And I think we as citizens need to view it in that context. So when somebody would say, Dr. Rowley raising the prices of goods, that is irrational, because you have to look at it in the international context in terms of what is taking place in Ukraine and otherwise. And similarly, crime fighting should be viewed in that context. And I would say that I've never been very optimistic about us getting a handle on it, because we tend to not look at it in that context. I'll end by saying this. We have a commissioner of police in the past who is praised a lot, but the records show that he was arrested and charged for being involved in drug trafficking. I'll leave it there for a while.
That's nebulous. You have a commissioner of police who was arrested and charged for drug trafficking?
I think that's Burroughs.
Had to be before my time.
That would have been Burroughs, I think.
A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
He was charged, and I think they dropped the charge eventually. This was, they found what was it? They
Oh,
found,
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's Randall Burroughs. I think was his name, yeah.
You just real read, because you couldn't be alive then.
Nah, that wasn't.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, sir.
Add to the Abdina Sitahar, right, that the murder, right, a high profile person in society, good standing, right, that crime haven't been solved, right? Sometimes even when you look at these GS1 thing that's happening on TV, sometimes you get that. Yeah, sometimes you get the view or the impression that, you know what, these are things that are happening, but you know what, we can't do anything about it. We just talk about it. We know the seriousness about it, but you get the impression, you know what, we can't do nothing about it. And I know that there are things that even you would talk on air, and there are things that you can't talk on air, because crime, guys, we had to look at the system. We had to look at the system of crime in our country. There are people in high places and important places that is fostering crime, right, for their own selfish reason. And until we get men that will, you know what, look at integrity, look at the country, look at the young down, and look at the futures, right? We'll just be talking, and nothing is not going to be done, because even Mr. Prince is strong. So what? So if I'm living in an area where it has crime, where I mustn't try, where I must go along with the flow. No, and I the problem. Too many people know, and yes, it's a small country, and you get the impression, well, that is my friend or that is my family. No, we had to stop that. And one more thing, you see this gun thing. To have a gun in our country, whether it be illegally or from a legal perspective, it come like a status thing then, right? To have a gun, yeah, you have status. Update with the affluential and the influential, but again, we had to check ourselves, because we reckon ourselves and we not doing nothing for our younger generation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, caller.
The Dana Sitahal case though was solved.
It was? No, it's not. No.
They
How
have
it was solved?
Raji Ali was charged and his cohort.
Well, charging and solving?
Well, I mean, as far as the police are concerned, I mean, that gets you
that solve means it's been resolved and he's gone through the criminal justice system. A charge has been proffered against Raji Ali, and he's still awaiting trial, innocent until proven guilty. You remember that principle?
I remember the principle, but I'm saying that with if we were to, this is just like from what you record. If you
and if he's exonerated,
that's that. I guess that's a different
exactly. Solve is a strong sentiment there. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Right.
Morning.
I'll jump off from that, and I will say that Raji, the alleged, was connected to government because he was running a program. Then we have this history. There's Berkey walking into the president house, having a relationship. I mean, this relationship between the so-called community leaders and the political elite is a glaring, visible thing in Trinidad and Tobago. RoboCop, and it could go down the list. And
Can I add a component to that?
Yeah. Hello?
Let me be careful in saying this. And we veer in Trinidad Tobago to a certain segment, and we don't veer to the people who could import and have alleged or fronting as big business, who are a significant component to the entire equation, because it's easy for us to look downstream as opposed to upstream.
Yeah, and I know I will add that, right, and that is just one component in a whole exercise of looking at 43 people who may or may not. And I think an interesting thing that was brought up by Sir Charles is that when you look in the hotspot areas, why you couldn't have these kind of permanent presence, like with the school situation, where now you have army and police there. And anytime I talk, because these gun things, men shooting off guns, you talk to anybody who come from those communities, they would say, yeah, those fellas is bravado, just normally shoot their guns off and to show off they have new weapons. And this one telling you, yeah, this one have new weapons, and he will shoot it off. They will shoot it off over the hill. And
it's a rank thing. It's a rank thing.
Yeah, it's a rank thing. So, and now here you have an army and presence in a community, and why you couldn't have done that, and why we can't have certain things in place because of a political elite that doesn't see it necessary.
Well, let me ask you something.
Really
don't you think the gangs know that the police army patrols in the Rosehill and environs are unsustainable?
Yeah, I think they have a fair understanding of what.
Don't you think they know it's only a matter of time before that disappear and they go back to the old ways?
Right. Yeah, no problem. But I'm also looking at it in the fact that we're not putting certain policies in place. That's why I always to support and improve surveillance, because if you don't do the necessary things, I think the necessary auditing and improve. Okay, you don't want to give West his authority to do the asking to this unexplained wealth. You know, the FIU, the other auditing arms, anything, proper public sector reform. When I see a political elite not investing in these things, I must say that you're kind of complicit in allowing a fertile environment or unfertile corruption.
I will go even further. Look at how many unanswered questions there are with the Vincent Nelson issue.
Yeah, and it goes on. And I think, I don't know, any lawyer, one-on-one lawyer will say that somebody, I could accuse you that if you're not putting the things in place that you want the environment to be the way it is, because it's supporting some sense. If you listen to Captain Hira, right? Who will say a lot of corruption
Commander.
is people. Yeah, Commander Hira. A lot of the corruption is people, friends doing favors for people, right? A lot of that is things. So when you're not putting in the auditing arms and in the places where they're supposed to be, I have to look at my friend and say, well, friend, I think you're kind of complicit in allowing the crime to be as healthy as it is. You know, at some point in time, you are complicit. You know, they say if you stay silent, you know, this conversation, we like to say, not all police are bad, but after a while, if you sit to the side and do great, you are also complicit in allowing your corrupted colleagues to survive. And you might say, well, you know, I fear for my life and everything, but you will have to say, yeah, you become complicit. So one bad apple.
You forget, and why shouldn't they fear for their lives? When we had a scenario, is it earlier this year? I think it's earlier this year, where a police operation was in Diego Martin, and an officer was shot in the back of the head. But the commissioner of police went on TV upon the advice of his officers and said he was sure. He was sure that the person that they were pursuing, Jelano Romney, who was the person of interest at the time, was possibly the assailant, because his officers mislead him. What happened to them officers who mislead them? Where are they now? They're back on duty? When last you hear about them? When last have we heard about that case when an officer, I know they were taken off duty and there was an investigation ongoing, but an officer died, more than likely, from a police bullet.
Right. And
that just gone into the great oblivion.
Yeah, a lot of things happen like that, and this is the thing. Now, right, and no individual should be able to put their head on thing, because that is why you have unions and people and groups and things. And when you have these group representatives who are not speaking properly to the proper overhaul of the environment of the innocents, that is the complicit, because you have groups who speak on behalf of me, the individual, who don't want to stick who's thing, and you're not speaking properly to the issues and supporting, you know, restorative things that will empower auditing arms. And that is the problem of the unions and representative bodies and the other things, that you're not speaking to your membership in the way, I think, to make sure that the political elite understand the Zeppo. They rarely get the Zeppo then of the situation of the society, because the unions speak on behalf, and that means the membership in speaking to their representatives have to say something. I know within all that is a kind of, we have the thing, but when you're speaking, how you speak is as important or more important than anything else. What comes out of your mouth in these certain issues, and I think when Tutor speaks and when all these groups speak, how we speak, and I find all those things, because I don't think any individual should be placed on a thing, but we have groups. That's why we form groups, because groups allow the individual to, the whole matchstick thing and stuff. When
as with everything else, all they do is flood the group scenario with agenda-driven groups. So there's so much group now, you don't know who is fish from fowl.
Yeah, it's a kind of relative. Okay.
Thank you. All right, 5 minutes before the hour of 8 o'clock. Good morning to you.
Talking about this same nonsense for 25 years, plus.
Paul, you mentioned the big fish. I don't know if you remember on the. I'm looking at it here now on
the
August,
big criminals.
The big criminals.
When the smallest call them small criminals. So we like to call them fish to soften it. The big criminals. We call them the big criminals.
August 22, 2005, 1,700, more than 1,700 kilograms of cocaine found on Passy Bay, Monas Island.
Mm-hmm.
And you and then the surrounding incidents with respect to that. The main house was not searched. They caught two Trinidadians and some Venezuelans. And then subsequent to that, there was a fire at Bryden's in Port of Spain. And I think the nephew of John Rahel, then health minister, was found headless.
Mm-hmm. Is that the Khoury murder you're talking about?
Dr. Khoury's murder, yeah.
Remember that? Very, very sinister scenario.
Gruesome
and sinister.
Gruesome is the word.
But again, I mean, and you never hear why, who, what, when, who held accountable, who charged, who convicted. Everybody just hush up, move on. Just another day in paradise. Carry on as normal. And we wonder why we end up in this den of iniquity now. And, to a large extent, I think about the criminal element. We're a country of talkers. We like to talk. We vent. We frustrated. We vent. But do we really hold anybody accountable? A lot of political mud slung right, left, and center. But do we really hold anybody accountable?
So something I would say, back then in 2005 when this happened, this was a few years after Dolce's arrest and execution. And I mean, that was the year, the time clearly of you had dons. But since then, we've had almost another generation of youths who are coming up in this thing. Because if you think about 2005 to now, that's going on 17 years or so. Someone would have been born in that particular time, is now in this thing. You understand? And you look at the people that we are seeing who are, in gangs, a lot of shooters and stuff like that. But the question I'd always ask is, do you think we are still in the same phase of there being our local crime landscape being dominated by these large unseen players to this day, to the extent that it was back then? That's
more so than now, more so, because the tentacles have become more entrenched. There's a sense of impunity because, by and large, given the possibly billions of dollars in illegal drugs and guns that pass through this country, how many really people have been taken down? So why wouldn't I feel invincible as a gangster or a drug don? You understand? As you say, the smaller ones, like the ones that the notorious names that we've heard over the years, they have been replaced like a production line. But we haven't really, it hasn't stopped, it hasn't stymied. They replaced the people who are lower down in the pecking order, rise. They face death, they are killed sometimes, or they leave the country, and it continues.
Yeah. Let's take this call. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ellie.
Good morning. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Doctor.
4 o'clock in the morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to your guest there. Hey,
Derek.
When you, Dr. Paul, I have a question. When you sit down in these committees, these joint select committees, and you hear these kind of comments and this kind of thing like this, the security minister say that they ask him a question if he ever asked a favor for anybody to get fired, and he say he don't remember that. How people could respond to that? Man, I already think the honorable prime minister should make a change the national security. I think Stuart Young is the rightest man for that portfolio in my opinion. I really think so. Mr. Hines, like I think he a little over his with that ministry. Maybe a little too much for him, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So that's just my opinion. In terms of
And like I did yesterday, I'll bite my tongue.
yeah, I mean, I guess when you sitting there, or you have no choice but to say that, But in terms of the crime, the crime really, I just hope they get handled, because boy, Steve and Paul has always told her I have my family living there, the sister, she children, you know what I mean? So I want the best for the country, and the crime is really out of control, and I hate to hear this notion about people calling and because they want to defend and say, well, it's a crime everywhere. So why we can't be, and everything have the exception to the rule. So why we can't be exception to the rule? You know what I'm saying, Paul? Anyway, guys, look to our listeners. See how you're going, brother. Everything going
Not bad at all. Rainy day in Trinidad and Tobago. All right. Thank you so much, Ellie. All the best to you.
Yes, sir.
Take care. All right. Let's get into our news brief. Better late than never, I would say. AV is in. Of course, a news brief all powered by Champlain.
Do you need to get work done on your vehicle? Look no further than the Auto Champions.